Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Mala's Out Sacred Heart Meditation Challenge. By now, you've had the chance to practice with myself on day 1, day 2 with Joey, and day 3 with Dan. So, day 4. Today, we're going to focus on balance. That's going to be the essence of our meditation, and we're going to try to cultivate balance on all levels. And one way that we might need to balance is by connecting to the earth a little bit more. And today's mudra is going to be the Prithvi mudra, the earth mudra. And this mudra helps us connect one to the earth, but then it helps us feel a little bit more balanced, bringing balance to especially our equilibrium. Some yogis will say if you're walking and you feel a little unbalanced, take the Prithvi mudra, the earth mudra, and maybe that might help correct yourself a little bit. So, as we move into our japa, let's take our malas. And as we begin to cultivate that sense of balance, that's our focus today as we invoke our mantra of Om Namo Narayana. So take the mantra or the mala, place it next to your heart. Assume the Prithvi mudra with the left hand supporting. Feel connected down to the earth, lengthen through the spine. And let's go within. Close the eyes. Take a deep breath in. Sigh it out. And when you're ready, perform japa. Om Namo Narayana. 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 Cultivating that sense of balance. Place the mala over your head. Rest the guru bead next to your heart. Assume the earth mudra, combining both ring fingers to the thumb, palms up, resting on the knees. Relax the shoulders. Focus at your spiritual heart, cultivating the sense of balance on all energetic levels. Imagination. See yourself living a balanced life. Feel yourself living a balanced life. Keep focusing internally on this sense of balance. Follow the breath as it enters and exits the body. Lengthening breath as you lengthen the spine. On the exhale, feel a little bit more supported by earth. Remembering you can come back to this sense of balance at any time. Take a deep breath in. Sigh it out. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. Bring the hands to heart center. Bring the thumbs to third eye. Remember your breath, check your vibrations, and remember you're a spark of divinity. Namaste.